All right, welcome everybody. My name's David Kopshever. I'm a volunteer ranger here at Katmai. We're going to be doing a play-by-play for the next hour or so. Thanks for being patient while we got things set up. So if you're not familiar with the play-by-play setup, I'll just be narrating the bear action we see in front of us, kind of like a sports commentator. I won't be able to necessarily get into the chat and answer your questions specifically. I do try to check in from time to time. So if you do have questions, feel free to post them there. You may be able to get them answered by some of the other viewers that have been watching for a long time. So the bear we're looking at now is one of the unnamed bears using the river this season. Some have called her Charge, as she's been a bit aggressive towards bear management staff and other bears at times. Some other people have called them the Yin Yang family or the Salt and Pepper twins. The cubs are, one's a little darker, one's a little lighter. While we were working on our stream, our tech issues, we had quite a bit of interesting action going on. This bear, I'll just refer to her as Charge throughout the next hour. She drove off 151 really pretty aggressively. 151 saw her and her cubs approach, gave him some space, walked up the falls up onto the lip, but Charge continued after him and really drove him out of the area, which was probably a really good move on her part, because now she has the falls all to herself. Just before that happened, 503, nicknamed Subadult, was, as we've seen him before, using the jacuzzi, and he was actually being more successful this morning than he has been in previous times that I've seen him there. He caught, I think I counted 3 fish in the jacuzzi. Still didn't have it totally down, wasn't able to plant himself in there like some of those bigger, heavier bears, but still finding a way to be successful. Really learning how to make the most of his time at the falls. And while he was fishing in the jacuzzi, there was another young subadult bear, maybe a 2.5-year-old, unidentified, that showed up for a brief moment. 503 showed some interest, and whether intentionally or unintentionally, chased that other subadult off. And it looked like he might have actually just wanted to play, or just kind of investigate who this other like-sized bear was. But that other subadult played it safe and really took off pretty quick. So it really did seem to work out in this sow Charge in her favor to chase off 151, and we'll see if he stays away for the next hour. We'll see kind of what comes our way. But this is a bear that we haven't seen along the river in previous years as far as we know. It could be a bear that we just don't recognize, that maybe took a season or two off and we can't match her up with a bear we've seen in the past. Could be that this is her first time on the river. But when she and her 2 yearling cubs showed up, they were all very, very skinny. Since then, they've gained quite a bit of weight. Their temperament's changed a little bit. When Charge first showed up at the beginning of the season, and this was in I believe the beginning of July, very skittish. Would come to the falls for really brief moments, try to dash in and grab some fish, and then pretty much immediately take off. As the season progressed, as they put on some weight, got used to fishing in the river here, fishing with other bears, they seemed to calm down quite a bit. And have learned to be more and more successful. But this sow and her cubs is one of many this year. We've got, you might have heard while we were setting up, 25 cubs that have been seen using the river so far this year. And that includes spring cubs, yearlings, even 2.5-year-old cubs, which we've got a few of. And so right now what Charge is doing is she's snorkeling. She's looking for dead and dying fish, slow moving fish, fish that have probably already spawned and are making their way back down the river. And that's a very typical thing to see this time of year. As September moves into October, we'll start seeing more and more bears down at the lower river, where a lot of the sockeye salmon that are dead and dying will kind of accumulate. So again, if you're not familiar with the play-by-play setup, I'll just be kind of a sports commentator for the Bears, narrating what we see in front of us. If I stop talking for any period of time, don't worry, it doesn't necessarily mean we've lost audio. I'm just kind of enjoying the view, maybe even thinking about what I'm going to say next. No promises though. And we've got another bear that's just shown up. Good. And this is a bear that I had a lot of trouble identifying early in the season. To me, he looked like just another subadult. As time has gone on and I've had the chance to observe more and more, I've gotten a little better. So this is, I believe this is 503. And he's returned after kind of investigating, maybe chasing off that other smaller subadult bear. As we were setting up our equipment here, I did notice in the chat somebody asked, how do bears like 503 and other subadults that are small, that don't appear to be putting on anywhere near as much weight as bears like 435 or 480 or 747, how are these bears going to survive over the winter time? And that's a good question, but they are putting on quite a bit of weight. I think if we look at 503's appearance beginning of the season compared to now, he does have a bit of a belly. He is looking fatter. Still, of course, not as fat as 747 or 480 or any of those really seasoned, successful bears. But I wouldn't necessarily be alarmed or concerned about 503's weight. He seems to be on track. He's not. He and other subadult bears, they're not as big as those other adult males to begin with, so we're not going to see the same weight gain. It'll be proportionately, they'll be putting on a lot of his weight as well. Smaller animals, and so bears that are smaller than other larger bears, they're also going to be expending less energy at a resting heart rate or in their hibernation state. And it's really been impressive to see how successful this subadult in particular, 503, has been. He's really turning out to be a very confident, bold, but not too bold subadult bear, and it's really amazing to see him learn how to use the falls and be more and more successful. There have been a few times that I've seen him fishing in the jacuzzi. Not a typical behavior to see from a subadult. Goes to show how confident he is. There's been a couple other times I've seen him do this, and I think I might have seen him catch one fish in about 3 jacuzzi attempts. Of course, I'm not watching him all the time. But then this morning we saw him catch 3 fish, all within about 30 minutes or so. We're really figuring out how to be successful, and he seems to be keeping somewhat of an eye behind him, back at Charge and her family. Kind of an aggressive sow with cubs. Again, she chased off 151 a little bit earlier. And in that case, that was certainly more than curiosity. She wanted him gone. Standing up, getting a good look, making sure that other sow, Charge, with her cubs, not going to come and act aggressively towards him. If that did happen, it would be very likely that 503 would back off, give her space, and avoid a potentially dangerous situation. And that's what I mean by not being too bold. He's bold, he's using the jacuzzi, he's present with other bears around, other larger, more dominant bears. But he's not too bold. He knows he is on the bottom of the bear hierarchy as a subadult. He knows he needs to keep his eyes behind him and be looking out for trouble. So really on his way to being a very successful bear on the Brooks River. We actually saw him catch one of the fish he caught here in the jacuzzi. He dropped. And you'll see bears do that at this time of year. What they're doing is they're selecting for the fresher, more calorie-rich more high in fat fish. As the salmon here spawn and as they continue to use up that last bit of energy, they're using up their fat reserves. So the fresher the fish are, the farther away from death that they are, the more nutritious they're going to be. And so the bears can smell that as they pick up the salmon. And since the salmon are still pretty plentiful, even here at the falls, they're able to afford to select for those more nutritious salmon. And so, not only is 503 being successful, which is impressive on its own for a subadult, it's impressive that these bears can survive at all. But subadulthood is challenging, as is being a cub, and 503 had a particularly difficult set of circumstances that he had to overcome as a cub. His biological mother, 402, who currently has 2 yearling cubs, actually abandoned 503. I believe that was in 2014. I might be corrected on that. But 503, being adaptable, being intelligent, and being bold and confident, he was able to find a new mother, which is very much, it's very rare. I wouldn't necessarily say it's unheard of, but very, very rare in the bear world for mothers to adopt cubs that are not their own. But he was successful in doing that, and successful in finding a new mother. And he actually got an extra year of care out of that new mother, who was 435 Holly. And so if you're interested in reading up about that, check out the Katmai Terrain blog. Check out the Bears of Brooks River, the Bear ID book. Those are all on the Katmai National Park website under the tab Learn About the Park. So it looks like Charge and her family has caught some fish. Now it's not widely believed that mother bears will actually share their fish with their cubs. What we see a lot is kind of extreme toleration, where a sow with cubs will catch a fish, begin to eat it, and the cub will approach and actually take the fish from its mother. Sometimes the mother bear is more willing, sometimes it's less willing to share or to tolerate that cub taking its fish. There was one instance that I saw, 128 grazer catch a fish, bring it up to shore where her cubs were, and without them really being too aggressive in trying to take it, she basically just left it on the shore and went back to fishing. So the issue of whether or not mother bears will share their fish, it's not been widely observed, so it's not widely accepted, but it's certainly a possibility. And that's one of the really cool things about the Brooks River and about the webcams that Explore.org has set up, is that we can all watch these bear behaviors and we can learn things that we didn't know before. If we start to see bears, or if we see a bear, an individual, sharing a fish routinely, then we can kind of amend that accepted belief that, okay, maybe they do share their fish. Maybe some do, maybe some don't. We still have a lot to learn about these animals, the brown bears. And this is one of the best places in the world to do it. And thanks to Explore.org, we can all participate in that. So as Charge and her family move up the river towards the falls, it'll be interesting to see what kind of reaction we get out of 503, cub adult. How much space is he going to choose to give her? And what will she tolerate? The bears along the Brooks River, you know, they've really got it made in the bear world. They've got a really reliable, really abundant source of food, the sockeye salmon. And this year, as it turns out, the silver salmon has been quite an abundant resource. But that doesn't mean that they live without challenge. One of the most dangerous things for a brown bear is other brown bears. Which is why we saw Charge chase off 151, why we see 503 paying so much attention to what's going on over in Otis's office with Charge and her cubs. He's making sure that he doesn't overstep his bounds and get himself into some trouble. I mentioned a minute ago how I've seen on at least one occasion 128 appear to leave a fish almost uneaten for her cubs. And I was in the comments section yesterday answering some questions. One was if 128 and her 3 cubs have been seen again recently. I just got word from one of the rangers here a few moments ago that 128 was seen 2 nights ago, still with all 3 cubs, and looking very healthy. Especially for a sow with spring cubs, they tend to have the hardest time putting on weight because they're at the height of their nursing. They're nursing more than a sow with yearling cubs. So they're sacrificing a lot of their energy to give to their cubs. But 128 seems to be getting quite fat, as per the ranger that observed her 2 nights ago. It really bodes well for her survival as well as the survival of her cubs. So if you're just joining me, my name's David Kopshever. I'm a volunteer ranger here in Brooks Camp, Katmai National Park, located on the Alaskan Peninsula. I'm here on an internship with the SCA, that's the Student Conservation Association. They put students and recent graduates into internships all across the country and organizations like the Park Service, like the Forest Service, Fish and Wildlife. We're taking a look at some wild brown bears. We've got this unnumbered sow with 2 yearling cubs. I've been calling her Charge. She's been given that nickname because of her aggressive behavior towards both bear management, staff members, as well as other bears. She's done quite a bit of charging, hawk charging. She's got these 2 yearling cubs. There's a couple things you can use to identify this family. The yearling cubs are a little off-colored. One's darker than the other. I believe it's the darker one that's a little bit bigger as well. Charge, the sow, has a pretty prominent shoulder hump. I'd say very prominent shoulder hump. She's very dark, even in July. Slightly tapered snout. So look for her in next year's edition of the Bear ID book. She'll be updated over the winter. We've also got, if you're just joining us, 503 doing his best in the jacuzzi. And he seems to be doing better now than previous days and weeks we've seen him here, not only is he catching more fish, but he seems to be figuring out how to maybe plant his feet a little better. He still gets pushed around by the current quite a bit, but I'd say slightly less than previous days and weeks. We also had 151 here earlier, as well as another unidentified young subadult. Looked to be maybe a 2.5. If you want to learn more about the individual bears, definitely check out the Bear ID book. Also, join us on the 26th of September at 11 o'clock a.m. Alaska time. We're going to have a chat with our bear monitor, Ranger Leslie, and she'll be able to answer your questions about what bears she's seen, and when we can expect to start assigning numbers to some of these subadult bears and some of these bears that we're just seeing for the first time along the river this season. So in order for a bear to get a number, Ranger Leslie needs to observe them on 3 separate occasions. Charge and her cubs have, I can say pretty confidently, been seen more than 3 times by Ranger Leslie. So I'm pretty confident she'll get a number. And it'll be interesting to see if she comes back again next year. She seems to be fairly successful along the river here, especially if this is her first year and she's still figuring things out. And I talked a little bit about subadults gaining weight for the winter time. And I used 503 as an example, but I think I neglected to mention he is really, really big for a subadult bear. He's very tall. He's got really long legs. And he seems to be putting on quite a bit of weight. The subadults are generally at more of a risk than adult bears for starving over the wintertime, for not putting on enough weight, not being able to take advantage of the abundant salmon. Because even though there's a lot of salmon, it's still hard to catch them. You still have to learn how to successfully fish and how to survive. But 503 seems to be doing that exceptionally well. As a smaller bear, he's going to burn fewer calories than a large adult, just like You know, other smaller mammals burn less calories than larger mammals. And again, it's not typical to see a subadult, a 3.5-year-old subadult at that, fishing in the jacuzzi. But he's been watching and learning from other bears, and he's bold enough to try it out for himself, and he's been successful. He's also not so bold that he's going to walk in there and hang out without looking around. He does quite a bit of turning of the head, making sure nobody else is coming. Because if a big dominant bear comes up without him noticing and finds this subadult in the fishing location that dominant bear wants, you can bet there's going to be some trouble. So always looking over his shoulder, always being aware of his surroundings. And it looks like Charge, the unnumbered sow, and her cubs are moving back on down the river. And it looks like she's really very close to those fishermen on the camera, but as I look over outside of the camera view, it's quite a bit further than it looks on camera. So they're taking off. In the meantime, 503 has successfully caught a fish in the jacuzzi. Surprisingly, he's going to try to eat it right there in the current. The last few I've seen him catch here, he brought up onto the island. You can see him really bracing the current as he eats that. It's incredibly powerful there. And that's why that fishing location is so successful. The fish that are washed into that water or that are trying to jump the falls in that location, they get washed right into the bear that's sitting there. And then that bear can pin the fish to its chest or pin it to the ground for a successful catch. And that's a lot easier if you're a big bear. If you're 32 or 747 or 856, you got a couple of advantages. Number one, you're a bigger target, so more fish are going to bump into you. As a smaller bear, 503, you know, the fish really need to hit them just kind of right in the. They need to be washed right into the right area. Those bigger bears are bigger barriers. The other advantage that a big bear has is it's easier to fight the current if you have more mass. The 747 can sit down in this powerful current and he's not even affected at all. He just plops right down, no problem, doesn't get pushed back, and waits for the fish to come to him. 503 is really having to work and struggle against the current to keep his footing. And there he goes. That was 2 fish in, you know, less than a minute or two. So as he does this more, as he practices, as he learns, he's becoming very, very successful. This is a bear that's on his way to, you know, maybe one day being a very dominant bear along the river. It'll be very interesting to watch him grow over the years. Especially considering his very unique life history. And we've got another family group showing up now. This is a family group that I have a very hard time identifying. Luckily, I've got Ranger Tammy here on the platform with me, helping me out with some IDs. And she seems pretty confident that this is 708. This is actually a bear that I've only seen once before. At least that I know of, that I've seen once before. So it's a good thing we've got Ranger Tammy here with some good experience on identifying these bears. Helped me out a little bit on some bears that I haven't seen a whole lot in the past. 503. Still fishing. Not too bothered by this sow and her cubs. So we'll see if they choose to fish here. If they choose to move on. So as they're a little bit out of the view, I'm going to try something I haven't tried before on a play-by-play. So if this doesn't work, forgive me. I'll go back to the norm. I'm going to try to remove the camera from the tripod and get a better angle of 708 and her cubs. So try not to get too seasick as we move the camera around. Try to be a little more steady if I can. I'm going to come over here, get an angle you might not be used to seeing on the Falls cam. This is an area where, though you might not be able to see it on the cam, we see a lot of sows and cubs hanging out here. Seems like a good area to come check things out. See who's using the falls, see if they can have the place to themselves and stay safe, and still have some escape routes. 503 is still hanging out, and I'm going to go back behind the platform now and see if we can see where 708 and her cubs went off to. And it looks like they're back there in the grass. So they're going to move up the river. They're actually using the angler trail. If you've heard that referred to, that's where that is. Just right off the back of the platform. It looks like they're going to move on. There's a lot of salmon on the upper river right now. With how late the sockeye salmon run has lasted, there's still a ton of salmon in the upper river. I've been up there a few times in the last few weeks. I've seen a lot of bears fishing up there. And it shows how adaptable they are and how they're opportunistic. They're gonna take advantage of, you know, where the salmon are. They're gonna, wherever the salmon are, that's where they're gonna go. Very intelligent creatures. Very opportunistic. And now we're back to just 503 doing his thing in the jacuzzi. We also saw 503 head up onto the lip of the falls at one point, just for a brief moment. Didn't have much luck up there. Went back to the jacuzzi, where he's been for almost an hour now. And here comes the fan favorite. Looks like 480 Otis. Heading on up to his office, it would seem. And he is absolutely massive at this time of year. A very successful bear, very old bear. He's somewhere around 20 years old. I believe he was first identified in 2001 as a young adult. So we're not sure of his exact age, but he's somewhere around 20, which is kind of the average lifespan of an adult male bear. But looking very healthy this year. Despite his handicap of missing 2 of his canine teeth. Just like humans, bears are susceptible to dental problems. They can have cavities, they can have abscessed teeth. And oftentimes their temperament is affected by that. And we have seen 480 than in years past. Still not a I still wouldn't call him an aggressive bear. I wouldn't call him dominant necessarily. But he has pushed a few other adult bears out of his preferred fishing location. And he has stood his ground against some other large, more aggressive bears. And as we saw Otis walk up the river there, it looks like he's moving really slow. He's really not. It's difficult to quantify, but if you try to walk next to a bear, even Otis, despite how slow their movement is, they travel very fast. You'd have to keep up a pretty significant jog to keep up with their slow lumber. And moving through the water, going upstream, is extremely difficult, at least for people. But these are incredibly powerful animals. And even moving against the strong current, they can keep up a pretty impressive pace. So I just looked through the chat real quick, and it looked like taking off the camera from the tripod and moving around to get those different angles seemed to work fairly well. Didn't look like anybody got seasick too bad. So I'll try to do that again in the future if the opportunities present themselves. But it's been a beautiful day out here so far. We had a kind of a small storm blow through last night. Just left us with clear blue skies. Nice and crisp outside. We've got those fall temperatures. Somewhere in the low 50s. So people are still pretty bundled up. The bears are probably nice and comfortable in their winter coats. But absolutely beautiful weather. And we are seeing, you might be able to catch this, we're starting to see the salmon flow over the falls in higher numbers. It's been happening for a week or two. That one we just saw jumping up the falls, which is amazing at this time of year. Not typical to see that late into September. But as the fish continue to be washed over the falls, as they continue to follow the current down the river into the mouth of Neck Neck Lake, we should start seeing more bears congregating there at the mouth, where dead and dying salmon will be easier to catch. They'll be slow moving. The reason we're still seeing bears here, although we're not seeing a ton of fish jumping, the fact that there are still some jumping means that there are some fish, some salmon that are still fresh. And that's what the bears are going to prefer. If they have the choice, they're going to go with the fish that's farther away from spawning because it's still got more fat on it. It hasn't used up all of its energy yet. And so if I was surviving out on this river, I would go myself where the fishing is easiest, down at the mouth where there's the dead fish just on the shore. It's easy pickings. But these bears are incredibly intelligent. They know that the salmon that are still swimming up the river, the salmon that are still trying to jump the falls, those are going to be more nutritious. They're going to have more fat on them. And so that's why these bears are still hanging out at the falls, trying to capitalize on those last extra nutritious salmon. So Otis in his office, 5:03 in the jacuzzi, and now all the way downriver, we've got another kind of silhouette of a bear. Not sure who that is from here. Whoever it is, they seem to have moved the anglers out of the river, so maybe there's another bear in the area as well. All the anglers have cleared out onto the out onto the shore up in front. Although there are some moving back out into the river downstream of that bear. And again, it looks really close on the camera, but when I look just with the naked eye, they look much, much further away than they do on camera. So we'll see if that bear decides to come up and try its hand fishing at the falls, or see if there's some other bears, see what comes our way. There is another bear moving up the river that you can just see through the trees there. And that's what's cleared out the anglers closer to us. Appears to be moving up the river. So I'll keep an eye out for that bear. Really some pretty incredible action going on at the falls right now. September, especially late September, not a time that we typically see a lot of bears up here. But like I said before, that long sockeye salmon run and that really strong coho silver salmon run has provided a lot of extra nutritious, extra fatty salmon for the taking up here at the falls. And here we go, 151 Walker back on the scene. I get asked a lot, who my favorite bears are, and there he goes, catches one right away. Awesome. I get asked a lot who my favorite bears are. I don't necessarily have any favorite bears, but I will admit some are particularly interesting to watch. The 151 Walker being one of them. He's got a lot of energy, likes to play with other bears, got a very playful demeanor. He's got a lot of energy when he fishes. Does a lot of pouncing. And he's also very tolerant of other bears. I've seen 480 drive off 151 a number of times. I've also seen 480 tolerate 151 a number of times. This seems to be an instance of the latter. There goes Otis with one. Wow, they're getting really close to each other. Or rather, 151 is getting really close to Otis. So as we watch 480 Otis do his best to high grade, to strip the skin off of this fish, we can see that he has a bit more trouble doing so. Missing those two canine teeth. And he's eating a silver salmon right now, not a sockeye. And so since the silver salmon have arrived into the freshwater later, they're going to be more nutritious. They're going to have more fat on them. And they're also bigger. Bigger than the sockeye salmon. Sometimes about twice as large as the sockeye salmon. So 480 kind of struggling with this high grading business, peeling off the skin, picking through and just getting those fatty parts. But overall, he's overcoming the challenge. Certainly capable of putting on weight, excelling in that as usual. And it'll be really interesting to see some comparison photos. I've already seen some from some cam viewers of how fat Otis has really gotten. And again, not doing that because he's lazy or because he's not exercising enough. He's doing that for his survival. If bears don't put on enough weight over the summer and over the fall, they will starve in the wintertime. 480 not looking like a bear that's going to starve in the wintertime. If you were watching last season and you enjoyed the Fat Bear Week and Fat Bear Tuesday, the Fat Bear contest, we'll be doing that again this season. We'll be starting that towards the beginning of October. And I'm not going to give you any spoiler alerts as to the full lineup of contestants, but I can say that, of course, 480 Otis will be one of the candidates for the fattest bear of 2016. But you'll just have to wait for the rest of the lineup, and that'll be coming out soon. I just opened up the comments section for just a moment and saw some people maybe disagreeing with me a little bit about Otis struggling. And you're right, certainly doesn't look like he's struggling. He certainly is able to consume the fish, but if you were to line that up side by side with another more healthy a bear with all of his teeth, you'd see that it's taken him quite a bit more time to peel off that skin. Again, struggling is a relative term. The only thing I've seen Otis truly struggle in is getting up the hill. A very successful bear, especially in his old age. It's really impressive that he can continue to survive and continue to thrive with his setbacks. .503, still doing his thing in the jacuzzi. I've never seen him here in this fishing location in the jacuzzi for so long. It's very impressive. And we may see him there in years to come as he becomes more and more successful, larger, more dominant. And now we've got the very photogenic 151 Walker hanging out by the rock like he often likes to. We do have another bear slowly moving up the river, just moved back into the trees. I'll keep an eye out and wait to see if that bear pops out again and get you guys a view of that bear as well. So if you're just tuning in, getting here a little late, my name's Ranger Dave. We're towards the end of our play-by-play for today. But we're going to try to get some more of these in before the remaining Rangers in Brooks Camp take off. We're also going to be doing a live chat with our bear monitor, Ranger Leslie. So it'll be a really great time to join us and ask us questions about the bears that we've been seeing this season and questions about the bear monitoring program in general. There we go, 503 with another fish. Looking good. And again, choosing to eat it right there in the jacuzzi. He may be worried that if he leaves, one of these other two bears could come and take his spot. And it's a testament to how successful he's been that he did not eat that entire fish. It may have been not quite as fresh as he wanted it, but it shows that he's doing just fine. He's eating plenty of fish. He can afford to only fill up on the most fatty parts of the fish and the most fatty fish themselves. Very successful for a subadult bear. So again, if you're just tuning in, the gang we got here in front of us, we got 503 closest, 151 by the rock, 480 over in the jacuzzi. Excuse me, over in his office there. We had a young unidentified subadult for just a few moments. 503 chased that other subadult off. We had 708 and her two yearling cubs. And we'll have to just wait and see if this other bear comes our way in the next few minutes. And there it is. Again, not quite sure who this bear is yet. Maybe we'll get a better view as it continues upstream. Looks like it might be Charge. And that's a unnumbered, potentially new bear to use the river this season. I don't see her cubs with her. They may be just up on the shore. Much more difficult for smaller bears, younger bears' cubs to walk upstream in the water, so they'll oftentimes follow their mother up on land. So again, I'll keep an eye out and maybe we'll get another good angle of that bear. And that was another salmon we just saw being washed over the falls. Again, as that continues to happen, as September moves forward into October, we'll likely start to see more bears congregating at the mouth of the river where it flows into Neck Lake. So keep an eye out on the lower river cam, and hope now that I have tried out moving the camera around freely off the tripod, I might try that again so we can, again, get you some more angles that you're not used to seeing. But I've talked a lot about the challenges that these bears face over the last hour or so. 503 had some very unique challenges and some unique ways of overcoming them. As he was a cub, as he was abandoned by 402, I found a way to find an adoptive mother in 435. Really showed himself and has shown himself in the following years that he's adaptive, that he's intelligent, and he's extremely bold and confident. Just before we began the broadcast, 151 Walker was challenged by Charge and her family, who drove him out of the falls area. But we saw as soon as Charge and her family left, 151 returned. Being opportunistic, and it's amazing that they're able to time things like this so well. It was within probably 10 minutes of Charge leaving the area that 151 returned. It's very possible that they use their incredible sense of smell to determine if other bears were present at the falls. He may have been nearby, waiting for his opportunity to come back and take advantage of these extra nutritious salmon at the falls. And as we can see, paying off. "151 has been giving himself a great chance at survival. He's putting on pounds quite well. Looking like a very healthy young adult bear. And of course, 480. Another incredible story of challenge. A very old bear, around 20 years old, missing 2 canine teeth. There's a real handicap. Bears are just as susceptible to dental problems as humans are. They can get cavities, they can get abscess teeth. The teeth can get worn down significantly to the point of not being usable anymore. Their teeth can fall out. And so 480 is had to overcome that challenge. And it makes it difficult for him to high grade, to peel off the most fatty parts of the fish. But he's been overcoming that challenge. He's taken his time. He's been patient with each fish. And as a result, he's put on an incredible amount of weight. And as we saw, who I believe to be Charge again, moving up the river just for a moment there. Looks like she moved up in this direction, saw the number of bears already using the falls, all males, and decided, that's not a challenge I want to put myself in right now. So it looks like she's opted, at least for the moment, to stay clear of the area and fish elsewhere. And of course, that's another way to overcome challenge, is just avoiding it. So I'm going to sign off in a few minutes here. I want to thank you guys for joining me. I hope you continue to watch the bears here and along the lower river. And I hope you can, as I'm sure you already do, appreciate the immense struggles and challenge that these bears have to go through in order to survive. They may have it made in the bear world with the availability of fish. There's an absolute abundance of salmon here. That doesn't mean it's an easy life. It's absolutely incredible that they can survive in an environment that can be so harsh, and that they can survive with so many other bears around. I've mentioned in the past that the survival rate for cubs on the Brooks River in this area is about 33% to be exact. And that's a lower survival rate than the general brown bear species of 50%. And that's because there is such a dense population of bears here. There's more competition. There's more large male bears that can pose a real serious threat to any other bear, but especially a vulnerable small cub. The biggest threat to bears is other bears. And when there's a lot of other bears around, the danger, the threat goes up. And because of that, survival becomes more difficult for young bears and cubs. And watching those struggles of survival, they can be at times difficult to watch. It can make us feel sad, it can make us even feel angry or frustrated. But in a lot of ways, it makes it all the more powerful and amazing to see these animals thrive and be successful. Bears like 480 Otis, he's doing very well right now, but it's a simple reality that he's not going to be around forever. Everything that lives at some point will die. He's had a very successful life, and hopefully he'll continue on being successful for years to come. Certainly an imposing figure this season. And this will be very interesting to see. And I'll be signing off in a few moments, but I really want to see if 480 decides to use the jacuzzi. What will the interaction here be? And it looks like 503, a very intelligent bear, as I've mentioned before, aware of his surroundings, aware that 480 is wanting to try this fishing location, and he's smartly moving on, giving him his space. Again, 503, a confident bear, a bold bear, but not overly so. Smart enough to know his place in the bear hierarchy. Overcoming that challenge of other bears, of competition, by staying safe. And we'll see if he tries to use a different fishing location, or if he decides to move on for the time being. Looks like he caught a fish there, but not one to his liking, not a fresh one, not one that still had lots of fat on it, so he let it right go. And another one. Again, such a successful subadult there. Typically don't see this many fish caught by a subadult. Particularly a young one like 503. 3.5 years old. Already figuring things out on his own at the falls. And another bear downstream. Looked like maybe another male by the size. We'll wait and see if that bear comes our way. But you can see with 480 how much easier it is for him to hang out in the jacuzzi. It's not getting blown around by the current. Also not to watch his back quite as much. Not quite as worried about other bears as 503. Still has to keep an eye out. There are other bears along the river that are more aggressive, more dominant than him. But more able to focus his attention on the task at hand. .503, not quite ready to leave. And man, for a subadult bear, for a 3.5-year-old, he's quite tall and quite fat. Looks like he's had enough for now. So thanks for joining me today. We'll be trying to get in some more play-by-plays in the next week or so. Don't forget to join us for the live chat with Ranger Leslie, our bear monitor. She's a really amazing source of information for the bears along the river here. And if you're checking out the cams for the first time this season, I'd recommend checking out the Bear ID book. It's available on our website, as well as just above the chat box. And now we've got another bear approaching the falls. It's like a large adult male. I'm not 100% sure who this is quite yet. It's funny, every time I start to pull away, something else draws me back in. It's never a dull moment here on the Brooks River. And 151, giving this new bear quite a bit of space, giving him a wide berth. And smartly so. The 151 moving on. This is 503. 480 still hanging out in the jacuzzi. Now we've got this new bear. Not really sure who it is. It's not 747. Doesn't look like 32. Doesn't look like 856. But I'm not sure who it is. Fairly large. Not quite as large as 480 Otis, but much larger than 151 Walker.